ugliness in the air as we have to breathe and deal with here, and it's getting worse all the time. How are you, my friend?
Well, okay, but I think you overestimate the wonders of Thailand. I've been in transit at the airport in Bangkok. Took some radiation measurements while flying.
Yeah.
I noticed there was a very white haze over central Thailand, the central plain. Very strange this time of year because there's not a lot of burning of rice stubble now. Not quite yet. That begins in about 3 weeks. It's usually very clear, but it's been very hazy. Very thick white haze hovering over the ground. And then the plane into the Gulf of Thailand, I noticed the illuminated pink clouds like I saw.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's called tritium illumination. See, what happens is tritium, as you know, it's a form of water. It's radioactive, lets out beta particles. What it does is it's an ionizing radiation. It frees a lot of electrons out of the water and shoots out neutrons. And what that happens, it reacts with other radioisotopes inside the water, particularly strontium. Okay, strontium, tritium interact, account for the glowing clouds that we see over Japan coming in, bringing in radioactive rain. My detector went off. My dosimeter detector went off.
It did in the plane? It went off in the plane?
Yeah, and this is 30,000 feet over Thailand. We're talking about the Fukushima tritium becoming pervasive, so we're getting very close to the equator. What this is all about is, this means there's massive amounts of tritium, strontium, water all over in the air, all over North America, and we're seeing these once again, as we discussed it, the year 2012, when they began, 1 year after Fukushima, the winter tornadoes, right?
Yeah.
Tornadoes never seen before.
Oh, yeah.
Never
Huge.
before in human history.
A monster.
Tornadoes. We see the jet stream bulging down into the into Mexico.
Yeah, let me explain that. Yeah, let me explain that. The jet stream came. I don't know if you folks saw it or not, but AccuWeather had it, and it came in over Oregon, headed down at about a 45-degree angle, left the United States in Arizona, went into northern Mexico, moving east, came back up into East Texas, and went right up through Dallas, and then up in the Appalachians, all the way up and then out into the Atlantic. I've never seen it go all the way into Mexico at this time of year. Never.
Things that never happened in natural history before, but this is not a natural event. In Texas, we know is where these tornadoes really, they call them freak tornadoes, really ripped through, did a lot of damage, killed a lot of people. And, yesterday, 5 days before I decided to take off for the vacation for the holidays, I was reading a little bit from the Buddha, and the words were very similar to the New Testament, the Gospel. You reap what you sow. The Buddha says, you may think you're out of it, but you're in it. Okay, no matter how much you think you're not part of this column, you're somehow safe somewhere. He said, you're in it. And he said, the drops of water, as small as they are, quickly fill a bucket. And what this all means is that what's happened in Texas is directly related to what happened 8.5 years ago, April 2007, when Shinzo Abe visited with George Bush, and they signed a secret agreement, to send nuclear warheads to Japan. A lot of that was used in Mox fuel. It had to be re-enriched inside Mox fuel at Fukushima. Reactor 3. And Reactor 3 is what's generating most of that tritium and strontium today. So what Texas, George Bush, the famous Crawford Ranch, Texas, governor of Texas, what he signed with the Japanese Prime Minister, came back home in less than 10 years. In less than 10 years, you reap what you sow, and we saw deadly destruction over Texas this past few days.
Well, out
of Amarillo, Texas, out of the Pantex plant, that's where that plutonium came from. Right out of Texas through the Port of Houston, where you remember a CIA contract agent was murdered, right? Roland Carnaby was murdered by the Houston police.
Nobody remembers that. It was it. Yes.
No, they remember
yes.
He set up. He suspected there was radiation coming through the port of Houston. Set up radiation monitors, and he was killed. And the stuff went on Israeli ship and came to Japan. Half the cargo was missing. The better half. But here's the wind that gave rise to the tornadoes today. You reap what you sow 1,000 times over. Upper Ranch is radioactive, George. Face up to it. You just shot yourself in the foot big time.
Both
and
feet.
you hurt your fellow Texans really hard. Okay?
Yeah. Wow.
That's
And,
what that, now they're just, before
all over the South, too. Arkansas, Mississippi. Yeah, it doesn't matter.
All over. That's right along the line of the jet stream. Where the jet stream marked up, that's where the tornadoes form. That's the area mixing between the high pressure, low pressure, hot air, and cooler air. The East Coast is just drenched with tritium by now. It's a terrible thing. Record floods in York, England. And
yes.
Before they said the worst floods in 70 years. Well, 70 years ago, they didn't have dams on all the rivers. These are dammed rivers now, with dams on them. So this is the worst flood ever in English history over there. Massive amounts of radionuclides, especially tritium, now becoming like an activator. Tritium is a trigger for hydrogen bombs, for plutonium bombs, and it's a trigger for these weather events. You can't get it out of the water. They're desperately trying. In Fukushima, they failed. The Kurion...
This is a fraud. The Kurion is a fraud. It doesn't work.
Yeah. Said they could take tritium out of the water. Now they're asking for a year. To build another machine. 2 years of delays.
Yeah.
By that time, it's much too late. Within 2 years, it's not just human health, or animal health, or plant health that's going to be affected. We're going to be talking about all our electronic systems going to be shut down. We're going to be in the black, in the dark. Switches, everything's going to go down. Phone lines, even conversations like this may have to be carried on some other way. Serious the problem is, and we're seeing the massive global weather effects. Why are they quiet? Are they quiet now, aren't they?
Oh, yeah.
You don't get... What is it? In centigrade, something like a 20, 30 degree rise in temperatures over the East Coast.
That's huge.
Maybe 2, maybe 1 or 2. We're talking about unprecedented, the hottest Christmas in history.
Well, 40 to 50 degrees over normal. I mean, it's nuts. You said something that's very interesting, and I had not remembered this. This happened in 2008 when Roland Carnaby was murdered. This was a hit.
Mm-hmm.
Let me just read this little sketch, because it's very interesting to go back and look at history and trace it forward. Roland Vincent Carnaby, American spy and CIA officer who specialized in the Middle East and Lebanese studies in particular, son of American diplomat to Lebanon and businessman Vincent Carnaby, owner of Carnaby Shipping, a successful magnate for the Middle Eastern shipping business. Alleged double life, sharing consulting in the shipping industry with intelligence services. Subpoenaed for the CIA's controversial kidnapping and torture program, Extraordinary Rendition, and after a routine traffic stop in Houston, Texas in April 2008, Roland Carnaby fled police after he was convinced of a cover-up and believed that he had been set up to acquire names and identities to the CIA program. After running out of gas and while reaching for a cell phone, Carnaby was shot, and they say he was thought to be searching for a weapon. Despite controversy around his identity and his death, a former president and CIA director attended his services. During investigations after his death, Wayne Madsen, investigative journalist, uncovered and revealed posthumously that Carnaby was a member of the CIA's clandestine service and had been in charge of port security and employee services contract. In 2010, the Roland Carnaby... So he was involved in Houston in a big way, and the whole thing.
Yeah, anti-proliferation. That's what the Carnaby Shipping Company does in the Middle East. It monitors all the cargo containers coming in ships prevent nuclear weapons from ending up in the hands of Al-Qaeda and other terrorists out, and also the governments down
obviously
there. That's his job. That's what Carnegie does. He's working for the Non-Proliferation Bureau, and that's why the intelligence community was stunned at his death. This is a core function that everyone, globally,
supposedly
is supposed to be supporting non-proliferation. It's not hands and not state players. He was taken out in the state where George W. Bush was governor and president at the time.
Same state where John Kennedy was taken out too.
Yeah. You can run, but you can't hide. You can't hide from what you set up, President Bush. You shipped the plutonium, war-grade plutonium, over to Japan. Now that stuff is melted down. It's in the air. It's in the water, and coming back to Houston. States.
Coming back to Texas.
Right back to Texas. Right back to Texas. Right back to the Panhandle. Right back to Houston. Don't say this is an act of God. God had nothing to do with it. This was a crime of man. Okay?
Amen.
This is not some outrage of nature, right?
Yep.
This was a political, technological crime that was committed against the interests of the people of Japan, against the interests of the people of the United States, Canada, Mexico, Russia, China, Vietnam, the Koreas, against everybody, against the Arctic, against Europe, against the entire Northern Hemisphere. This is one of the biggest crime, probably the biggest crime ever committed, bar none.
No, I'm not going to argue that. No way.
It's very unusual. You have the punishment for this. It's just so unusual. Again, it's not punishment. It's just a cause and effect. It's an effect and the cause of shipping that boatload of plutonium to Fukushima. And now we're paying the price, and gosh knows what's going to happen. This tritium mist, this haze is just everywhere. It's just everywhere. That's what happened in England. There comes a point where it just activates, you see. It just activates.
So it's a trigger. It's not a mutation agent in and of itself. It's more of a trigger.
Well, it'll mutate you if you drink the water, and there's tritium in the water. There's tritium in the water all over the Northern Hemisphere, and the percentage is building up. So, yeah, it is a mutation.
It will give you cancer.
Ingestion. Yeah, the head of British nuclear medicine, he warned about the effect of tritium. He said, well, all the agency says it's not harmful. He says that's nonsense. If you ingest it, it's terribly harmful. So,
Yoshi, is it true there may be more tritium being emitted from Fukushima now than all the other radionuclides?
That's what's changing the whole character. There was a lot of tritium that came out in that first few months out of Fukushima. Reactor water was flooded down, and then we had the melt off there, and the rainy season and the typhoon season. What happens is underneath in the ground, inside all of that spaces in the gravel beneath Fukushima, you get an inversion layer. The fresh water rolling off the mountain basically is lighter, it's cooler, and it sort of compresses on top of the tritiated water, the radioactive water. It'll pick up some radiation enough to alarm everybody and kill off most of the life in the Pacific. But what's happened is they built a diversionary channel to prevent that water from coming because they didn't want so much fresh water going in. When you remove that fresh water, that constant flow, the inversion layer breaks down. It's very much like the LA inversion layer. When cool air comes down in large masses, the smog gets trapped. As soon as there's no more cool air coming down, the pressure is going the other way, you basically will see the smog lift. What's happening is that the tritium water is lifting. Now, that's why we're seeing this massive increase in tritium levels in the water. It was all down below. It's created it is from the reactors themselves, when the tritium is created in the reactors, by the bombardment of water, neutrons, by neutron emitters like plutonium and uranium during meltdown. Underground now is obviously building up the levels because of the chlorium down there. Tokyo Electric, just about everybody now admits that the containment vessels of the reactors were cracked, that the nuclear material escaped either in the atmosphere when in the burn-off and in the steam, or it went into the ground. Now, stuff